5. Rapid Rupture. Seaman Semyonov's engineering job gave him a legitimate reason to be in the United States, but that didn't make him any less suspect in the eyes of the FBI. American agents had no evidence that Semyonov was a spy, but they knew some Soviets living in the United States were spies. They figured Semyonov might be one of them. They followed him on the street, into restaurants, onto the subway. Semyonov and a KGB colleague named Alexander Felixov began working together to try to shake the FBI. We often tailed each other on our way to secret meetings, recalled Felixov, to make sure that we were not being followed. If they weren't sure whether they were being watched, they had several strategies ready. It was a good test to enter a bar or a store, explained Felixov, because one of the agents had to run inside to make sure no rendezvous was in progress. You could also hop onto a bus, which would force the FBI agent to tip his hand by getting on also. Years later, Felixov was asked whether he and Semyonov felt guilty about stealing technology from the Americans. After all, soon after Germany attacked the Soviet Union, the United States began shipping planes, tanks, cannons, and food to the desperate Soviets. But Felixov and Semyonov held a view that was common among Russians at the time. Yes, the United States was helping the Soviet Union, but not out of the kindness of its heart. The United States and the Soviet Union had never been friendly, and nothing had really changed. America's help to the Soviets was the product of cold logic. The Soviet Union was battling Germany. America badly wanted to see Germany beaten, so Americans were glad to have the Soviets do the bloody work of fighting Hitler. When you know you are being taken advantage, Felixov said, you have every right to be clever. Meanwhile, the FBI was watching Americans too. One night early in the war, Robert Oppenheimer drove to the home of a friend and fellow Berkeley professor, Hakon Chevalier. Oppenheimer parked in the street and walked to Chevalier's front door. Watching from down the block were two agents of the FBI. The agents knew that Chevalier was a member of the Communist Party. They knew he hosted political discussion groups. It wasn't illegal to be a communist, but it seemed likely that American communists might feel allegiance to the Soviet Union. Could a citizen be a communist and a loyal American at the same time? The FBI thought not. So agents watched known communists like Chevalier paying special attention to their friends and associates. In 1941, the FBI opened a file on Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer continued to teach physics, but he felt restless, like he should be doing something to help stop Hitler. Many of the men I had known went off to work on radar and other aspects of military research, he later said. I was not without envy of them. The war news got worse and worse. Germany formed an alliance with Japan, which had a powerful military of its own and dreams of building an empire in Asia. While Hitler's forces overran Europe, Japan was on attack in China and Southeast Asia. The United States cut off oil exports to Japan. This left Japan, a nation with few natural resources, with barely enough fuel to survive another year. President Roosevelt hoped Japanese leaders would be convinced to stop their armies from advancing further. Instead, Japan became even more determined to conquer new territory, new sources of raw materials, even if this meant taking on the United States. With so many crises competing for Roosevelt's attention, the Uranium Committee continued to just crawl along. Frustrated by the slow pace of progress, physicist and U Committee member Ernest Lawrence urged the committee to bring in some fresh talent. He suggested starting with a colleague of his at Berkeley, Robert Oppenheimer. In October 1941, Oppenheimer attended his first meeting of the Uranium Committee. The members discussed the largest man-made explosion in history to that point. In 1917, in Halifax Harbor, Canada, a ship packed with millions of pounds of bombs and ammunition caught fire and blew up. The blast flattened buildings a mile in all directions and killed at least 2,000 people. It sent a 1,000-pound anchor soaring 2 miles through the air. One uranium bomb, small enough to fit in a plane, could pack about 10 times that power. The meeting changed Oppenheimer's life. From that moment on, he knew he found his role in what was becoming a global showdown. I spent some time in preliminary calculations about the construction and performance of atomic bombs, he said, and became increasingly excited about the prospects. 2 months later, at the U.S. military base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, an Army sergeant named Joseph Pesek woke up early. It was December 7th, a Sunday. Pesek was looking forward to a few hours of leave. After breakfast, I headed for the bus stop to wait for the 8:05 bus to take me to Honolulu, where I was to play golf, he said. While sitting there on a bench, I noticed a large flight of aircraft approaching from the northwest. As the planes neared, Pesek saw them start a sudden dive toward the harbor, where most of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet was docked. Some kind of training exercise, he figured. Standing on deck of the battleship of the USS Arizona, a sailor named George Frainer had the same thought. First, he heard the buzz of airplane engines. Then he saw the planes drop out of the clouds. It didn't mean anything to us, he remembered, until a large group of planes came near the ship, and we could see for the first time this rising sun emblem on the plane wings. This red sun was the symbol of Japan. The Japanese were attacking Pearl Harbor. Bombs began smacking the water, smashing into ships, blasting planes parked on the ground, igniting fires everywhere. "Air raid! Air raid!" shouted a voice over the ship's loudspeakers. "This is a real attack! Real planes! Real bombs!" Frainer dashed below to get ammunition for his gun crew. He was lifting a 90-pound case when he heard a deafening roar and felt the entire ship rock violently. The lights went out, the cabin filled with smoke. The metal walls were heating up as Frainer felt his way to the ladder leading up to the deck. He started climbing. I was nauseated by the smell of burning flesh, which turned out to be my own, as I climbed up the hot ladder, he said. A quick glance around revealed nothing in the darkness, but the moaning and sounds of flailing bodies. When he finally tumbled onto the deck, Frainer saw broken bodies and body parts and pooling blood and flames everywhere. The ship was going down fast. He leaped over the side and struggled toward the shore, splashing through the water covered with blotches of burning black oil. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor destroyed or damaged 18 warships and nearly 350 planes. More than 1,110 crew members went down with the Arizona. A total of 2,390 American soldiers and sailors were killed. "You gave the right declaration of war," Adolf Hitler raved to the Japanese ambassador in Berlin. "This method is the only proper one." Roosevelt was having lunch in the White House when he got the news. "They caught our ships like lame ducks," Roosevelt shouted, pounding his desk. "They caught our planes on the ground, by God, on the ground." As radio and newspapers spread the story, the mood in America shifted quickly from shock to fury to vows of revenge. Roosevelt asked Congress for an immediate declaration of war on Japan and got it. "No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion," Roosevelt declared, "the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory." Hitler responded by declaring war on the United States. The sights were set for the biggest and deadliest war in history. The United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union led the Allied powers against the Axis powers of Germany, Japan, and Italy. At stake, the future of the world. Pearl Harbor was a turning point for Robert Oppenheimer, too. From that moment on, he decided to forget about politics and discussion groups. He decided to pour all of his energy into beating Hitler in the race for the atomic bomb. Just a few weeks after Pearl Harbor, I received a phone call from Oppie, recalled a young physicist named Robert Serber. He said he was in Chicago and he wanted to come down and talk with me about something. A former student of Oppenheimer's, Serber was teaching at the University of Illinois in Urbana. He had no idea why Oppenheimer would want to see him. Oppenheimer drove to the campus and found Serber. They walked out of town and into the cornfields. When they were alone in the fields, Oppenheimer explained his work with the Uranium Committee. He told Serber he was about to be placed in charge of a fast neutron research, the study of speedy neutrons and fission. His ominous official title would be Coordinator of Rapid Rupture. He wanted Serber in Berkeley as his assistant. Serber and his wife packed up their car, drove west, and moved into the apartment above Oppenheimer's garage. At Oppenheimer's office on the Berkeley campus, they began designing the atomic bomb. The work was thrilling and frightening. There was no way to know what German scientists were up to, or how far ahead they might already be. Oppenheimer knew that this was a duel the United States could not afford to lose. "We were aware," he said of the Germans, "of what it might mean if they beat us to the draw."